This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. Searing a brand into the flesh of a creature is a painful way to stamp ownership. That stamp is unique and permanent. Now that creature is property for the rest of its life. But when the human mind is branded, that ownership often defines the way we live the rest of our life. Our trauma is stamped directly onto our brains and holds an enormous amount of power over our soul. The traditional thinking is that this brand will be attached to us forever. In many respects, the idea is correct. The brand on our minds due to our trauma will be there permanently. It's our choice whether we wear that as a brand or a badge of honor. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Felice, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button like it owes you money. Subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. This is an episode that 2 years in the making. I'm going to say. Yes. Tonight we welcome Chad Burpee all the way from the great state of Texas, the Lone Star State. You flew all this way to come and sit down. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It's not as great as you think it is, but I'm so grateful that you're here. We connected and, we had bonds other than police work, what it seemed like, but thanks for coming in.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here and just be able to share our hearts with each other.
So we're going to talk about something tonight. Chad was intimately involved with the Dallas 5 shooting. As a police officer, it was one of the marquee events in law enforcement, probably one of the biggest tragedies that we've seen in the last 10 years, and you bore witness to it. So we're going to go through that incident with a fine-tooth comb because I know it affected you. Before we get into anything, let's do a big shout-out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police. We certainly don't trust anybody as podcasters, but we do trust the guys over at Toyota Hackensack. So do me a favor. Go to toyotahackensack.com and let me find your car, but you can let them find your car too. Also tell them the Suffering Podcast sent you. So Chad, each week, you've watched some shows. Each week we take a question from our audience. This question comes from Bright Light 316. I like this one. Now, this was an odd question for me to pull. I usually don't pull these types of questions, even though I do get asked this all the time. What did faith do for you in your darkest of times? And those people who are listening right now, they're going to go, oh my God, he's going off the rails. No. This has a connection between you and I want to hear your take on this.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good question to ponder. Well, for one unique thing is I grew up in church. My dad is a minister, so I grew up with the faith. Pretty superficial growing up. It just went through the routines with things, but not until I got out on my own. I questioned a lot of things, and then obviously some things in my life brought me down to some dark times. And I questioned even God, if he was even real or if he was even really who everyone else said he was. And so I had to, in my darkest time, I'd really question that and find out who he was for me, not what everybody else said. And through the darkest time is when I found him the most, actually. So
it's funny how suffering and pain and loss and hurt will bring you closer to God when that time comes. I did not have the benefit of faith when I was in my darkest of times. As a matter of fact, I was at a detriment because I didn't have my faith when I was going through my worst of the worst. I wanted to, it seems like a really great idea, but being an atheist to me is very easy because then you can do whatever the hell you want, consequence free.
Right.
Hey, listen, we're here. And whatever happens here stays here. This is not Las Vegas that we live in. This is the United States. This is the world. We are the human race. There are consequences to our actions. Faith puts our governor in check all the time. If you have faith, then number one, your fear is lowered because you know that there's something after that. It teaches you how to be a better person because you're doing it for faith's sake. So even if you don't have faith in God, you should live like a Christian. You should live like a religious person because it's going to put you on the right path to be a good, moral person. Because I think that's what we're all fighting for, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it gives you a set of priorities and beliefs system to guide your life with. And obviously at the beginning, like in your case, you may not know how to navigate all that at the beginning. With me growing up, you had all that in front of you, but you still had to find it for yourself.
I watched the darkness just overtake me. But there were some key moments in my life that I didn't realize while they were happening. When you're in the midst of stuff, you really don't identify all that stuff. In the key moments, I realized my faith was always with me. I just didn't identify it. I thought it was something else. I thought it was a pause. I thought it was the world or the another dimension. I was all screwed up. But here's one of the things. When I finally rediscovered my faith, it showed me exactly how dirty I was. Okay, because when you start getting clean, you realize how dirty you used to be.
Right.
But it also taught me how to deal with my pain and my trauma in a much different light, to have a little bit more trust in letting that stuff out, knowing that there's only one judge for me.
Right.
So it allowed me to not care what other people judge me as. So that's what the faith did for me, but it didn't happen until I was already broken down.
Right. My
foundation was destroyed, and then faith just built me up from the foundation.
Kind of the same with me. Even though I grew up in the church, father being a minister and everything, I didn't really truly find my faith in God until I was broken and realized that he was my source. He's the one that could only heal what I'm going through. He has the answers. And so, it was in my darkest times is when I truly found my faith in him.
I just did an Instagram live, and it's whatever pain, struggle, and suffering you have, you're being prepared for something. I was just watching this interview with Josh Gates and Penn Jillette. Penn Jillette is a renowned atheist. He has and he'll talk about it very freely, almost braggadociously. He'll talk about it. And he told this story where he said, somebody had told him, wait till your parents die, then talk about faith. And his question was, if I watched my mother, who died a very long and painful death, I would have been horrified if I had faith in God. Like, how could God allow this to do this? So my Instagram live was, you're being, whatever pain, suffering, and trauma that you have, you're being prepared for something. So what his mother went through was preparing her to get her ready to go on to the next level, which was death.
Right.
But God, what a sad, depressing existence if you thought there was nothing else.
Right.
That's also very hard for people to think.
Well,
about.
I think with faith comes hope. And so when you're going through something, you have to be able to see light at the end of the tunnel. You may not see it at that moment, but you know that eventually there is light at the end of the tunnel.
More importantly, it gives you purpose.
Yes.
You're a good person for a purpose. You're a good person for people around you. You're a good model for your children. Something like, especially men who go to church, like 90-something% of their kids end up in the church. They follow. They're watching what you do. People around you are watching what you do. And if you're a man of faith, they're going to want to know. They're going to say, seems like a really good person. Let me find out more about him. So it's just, there's a domino effect when it comes to that stuff. Bright Light 316, which I love that name. Thank you so much for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. So Chad, how did we connect exactly? Because I cannot remember.
A couple of years ago, I was on YouTube there, and I saw a video that you were on sharing your story with your officer-involved shooting. And when I watched it, it just resonated with me and the situations that I experienced as a police officer. And so I just wanted to connect at that point. Also, at the same time, I was going through some marital issues and different things like that. And I just felt compelled to reach out to you. You reached out back, and we just connected. And then we did some follow-ups and just kind of checked on each other, and really encouraged me while I was going through my dark time.
I think the reason that most people get involved in this world is they want to connect to people, right?
Right.
And very early on, when there's very few subscribers, very few listeners, and you connect to that one person, it's soul satisfying.
Yes.
You know, and I feel sorry for the people who don't do. Like, if you reach out to me, the people who don't get back think that you're some elevated position.
Right. I appreciate that you weren't like that.
Yeah, no, I don't see, like, what did you get involved in this stuff for? You want to connect to people, whatever it is, whether you're talking about technology, whether you're talking about lizards, whether you're talking about stress, trauma, or pain, you're ultimately trying to connect with your audience.
Right.
And for somebody actually to give you validation on that, you're like, oh, all right, you know, you go to sleep a little bit stronger, your head falls on the pillow, and you're like, okay, I did my work today.
Well, and that you got through your situation, and even though mine had been a few years before I reached out to you, I just felt like, hey, I can finally, if he can get through that, then I can get through what I've gone through.
Right, because I'm an idiot. So if I can get through it, then you can get through it.
Sure. And I just feel like that there's not anything that we go through that no one else has ever gone through.
You don't have to agree so quickly that I'm an idiot. Just I want to let you know.
But I just feel like that we've all gone through stuff, and
it's the one thing we all have in common in the human race.
Yeah.
We all got pain, suffering, and trauma.
We've all failed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one thing. We've all failed at something or haven't got something right, and but yet we can learn from it. If we can learn from it, then we can move forward, and there's still hope. Yeah?
If you think you're, you know, and that's where I train my kids. I say, if you're going to go through life thinking that you're never going to fail, man, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's what life is. It's failure and learning how to pick yourself up from that, learn from the failures, and try not to do it again.
Well, and your kids would appreciate it too, that you're real and you're not trying to be a whole different persona. You know, that you're perfect, because they see you.
How old are you, Chad? I don't even know.
I'll be 50 here in May.
Okay, so we're the same age. I just turned 50. You're going to be 50.
Yeah.
And our parents didn't show us a lot of that vulnerability. Didn't show us. I think they were very afraid to see them fail. We've seen our parents fail before.
Sure.
But I think they sort of shielded us from that. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's like, no, I did this stuff, you know. And my kids, I know they have watched stuff on me, although I've tried. I never encouraged them to watch this stuff. I know they've watched stuff on me. And I've gotten this question before, like, aren't you afraid that what your kids are going to say? And I'm like, no, because this is what it is. If they've watched their father, my oldest watched his father go through this horrible situation.
Right.
So you're modeling for them.
Right. Same with I've got two kids. They're older now, in their 20s, and they've seen their dad fail many times, but they've seen that the end result is that I pick myself back up and I keep going. And I think that's the key when you're showing your kids you going through a failure, that you can still overcome that. So
now you're a little bit of, I try not to do too much background on people before they come in, but we've known each other for a while, so I know a little bit about you. You were like a nomad growing up, right?
Yeah.
You were everywhere.
All
so
over.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up?
I was born actually not too far down the road in Dover, Delaware, at Dover Air Force Base. My father was in the military at the Air Force Base there.
I thought you were going to say at Dover Raceway. And, you know, your dad was Reese Bobby.
Right. Well, he did race cars back in the day, so I don't know if he found my mom there. I don't know.
Did he ever tell you if you're not first, you're last?
All the time. The time. But so we lived there just for a couple years, and then we moved to the Philippines at Clark Air Base. My dad was stationed there, and then we moved after a couple years there. We moved to Travis Air Force Base in California. Then my dad got out of the military and moved to Maine. That's where my family's from. Both of my parents born and raised in Maine. So I grew up most of my childhood in Maine.
Stick with Maine for a minute.
Yes.
Maine is a very interesting place.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what my experience is in Maine.
Okay.
And this is days before GPS. Before I was a cop, I was traveling all over the country. If you stop somewhere and you ask an old guy, hey, I'm trying to get to address X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Here's what you're going to get. First question you're going to get. Well, you want to know from here? No, asshole. Why don't you give it from your house?
Right.
Okay, because I have no idea where I am.
Right.
That's going to be the first thing. Second thing is, okay, well, go down to where Joe's Corner Store used to be in 1965 and make a right.
Right.
Dude, I don't know where I am. And then the third one was, do you want to know the shortest direction? No, I'll tell you what. Why don't you take me via Nebraska?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or they'll say you can't get there from here. So that's what they'll say.
You can't get there. You can get to everywhere from here. How's that?
But they will say that. Yes.
So that's an interesting place.
Yes.
If you don't know, watch Pet Sematary, and that's kind of right.
Right. I do have an interesting story with that. Actually, as a kid, third grade, Stephen King would come out and teach a writing class to our third grade class. So I was familiar with him growing up as a kid. But
It
yeah,
scared the shit out of you. Hey, kids, you want to hear a story?
didn't- yeah.
No.
we didn't know what he did though. We just knew he was an author, that type of thing. But
Did he
yeah.
go by Richard Bachman?
No, that was until later on. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting, though.
Sure,
He's a
sure.
strange dude.
He
man.
is.
He's
He
a
is.
strange dude, but
did a lot for the community though.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, he's a Maine guy through and through.
Yes.
Everything is Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon. Everything's Portland.
right.
So you grew up most of your life in Maine?
Yes.
How-
I would say probably the age of roughly about 7 years old, up until I was probably about 17. I left a year. We moved to Springfield, Missouri, just for a year. My dad finished up some college there, and then we moved back to Maine. But yeah, pretty much my childhood. We lived in a small town called Atkinson, Maine. Population probably 25.
Wow.
Out in the backwoods of, and we just, back in the 80s, we just ran wild, no supervision at all or anything.
Well,
like
you
that.
didn't need it. There's no danger
no.
around besides a moose.
No, we didn't lock doors,
Yeah.
nothing like that.
And
so.
and man, if you've never had the opportunity to see a moose
Oh, yeah.
in person,
Yeah, way
They-
bigger than what you think.
holy shit. I
Yeah.
was I think I was in New Hampshire once, and I was in a hotel room, and I opened up the curtain, and a moose is staring at me.
Right.
And I'm like, holy shit, look at the size of
They're
this thing.
fast too. They run fast.
Well, so one of the things people don't realize is that's one of the, with traffic accidents, they kill people, not because when people hit them, not because the collision kills them, because usually they take out their legs and they fall into the windshield.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And then where'd you go after 17?
We moved to, my dad was still a minister at the time, so he got a church right outside of Kansas City, Missouri.
So he's out of the Air Force.
Out of the Air Force, and started a couple different churches, or I had church jobs while I was a kid growing up. And then he decided to leave Maine and get a new opportunity right outside of Kansas City, Missouri. So we moved there.
I heard they got some crazy little women there.
In Kansas City, Missouri?
Oh, you never heard the song?
No, I don't think so.
Go, you can listen to. I want you to listen to the song Kansas City.
Well, I would probably back that up, though. Just experience. But so then I joined the military. After that, I joined the Air Force once I was done high school. So.
And that was your path. What did you think about military life? I mean, you kind of knew it.
I
going
did.
in.
I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of the military. I had some dreams of either being military or law enforcement. That's kind of what I was looking at. I had an uncle that was he actually is still a police officer. He hasn't retired yet. He's still doing it. But he was kind of my hero growing up. And so I always looked into either law enforcement or military. So I decided to join the Air Force, and I was Security Forces, which is military police and the Air Force. So that's where my law enforcement started at 19. So.
At 19, you're in charge, carrying a gun all the time. It's an enormous responsibility. You're around soldiers who can
Yes.
do some stuff.
Sure.
Sure. Especially with downtime. Downtime's the worst thing for a soldier.
Right.
And you have to, and these are people who you know.
Right.
If you're on a base, you kind of know everybody on a base, right?
Yes. It's like a small town.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're going to have to go in there and enforce justice on people who you know, who you work with, who you see every day. And
Right.
when they get out of the brig, you're going to see them again.
Right.
How was
Right.
that? How was that reaction?
Obviously, it was very new, being 19 and having all that responsibility. I just kind of, I was the type of kid, I liked structure. So I was by the book. I was fine with doing all that. It wasn't actually until I did a couple tours overseas, like in other countries, that's when my eyes really opened up. When I was back, I was stationed in Little Rock, Arkansas. That's where my base was at after basic training and all that. So working the base just stateside was pretty basic job type of deal. It wasn't until I went overseas and just saw things, different countries, different cultures, how they did things. And then there was an incident that happened over there that I had to deal with at 21, 22 years old.
Would you want to talk about that?
Sure. I think it was in 1996. It was called the Kobar Tower bombing. There's a truck that came up to a building that housed other airmen, different military personnel there. And the fuel truck, I think it was a fuel truck, it had explosives on it, tried to come up through the front gate. They didn't have the right paperwork, so they went around and parked the truck near this building. And it exploded. 19 Air Force guys died, and like 300 and something people were injured through that. So that kind of opened my eyes, like, okay, this is real now. There's real stuff that happens. Really my first taste with like death, any of that kind of stuff. I dealt with some of it. My dad being a minister, people dying, funerals, that kind of stuff. But
It's totally different.
Totally different.
When you live a natural life and you die naturally, or even if whatever it is, you're seeing the aftermath of it. You're seeing the effects on other people. Where here, you're actually seeing the carnage.
Right. And so I just that opened my eyes. Like, okay, this is real now. What I'm doing is real. But it almost it almost opened my eyes even more to what my purpose was now in the military. Before it was just kind of a police job and that kind of stuff. But now, man, I'm protecting the United States. I'm doing things over here. So that was over in Saudi Arabia, and then I spent a little bit of time in another country, United Arab Emirates. I was over there.
They had a big contingency of English-speaking people over there. Because I had a buddy of mine, his brother was over there teaching English.
Yes, they have a lot of their culture is westernized, so women can wear whatever they want. A lot of Americanized or westernized things over there. Yes.
And then once one of the wars, I think it was after 9/11, they had to leave. Like they weren't welcome there anymore.
Right. Yeah, they've changed their ways now, a lot stricter with that. My time in UAE was pretty lax for the most part. It's
a wealthy country, right?
Oh, one of the richest in the world. Yes. Yeah, a lot of money. Of money. You've got Dubai, and then I was in Abu Dhabi, which is where the military base was, and so I was there.
Yeah, somebody was just telling me about Dubai. It's like you'll see Lamborghinis driving
everywhere,
driving down the middle of the street. But the Burj Dubai or the Burj Khalifa now is like next door is a hovel. It's got nothing, and there's nothing in between.
Right. Yeah, when I was there, none of that was even there yet. There were still there wasn't any big structures. I mean, a few skyscrapers, but not a whole lot.
Yeah. So you come back stateside, and what was your key to get out of the military?
Just my enlistment was 4 years, and so I thought maybe I want to get out and go to college, and then.
And you're pre 9/11.
Yes, this was in 1998.
Okay.
So my term was up in January of 99. So that was before, yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to go to college and then maybe do some law enforcement. That's kind of what my plan was.
And you're 22, 23 years old?
About 23 years old.
23 years old. And you get out, do you end up going to college?
I do. I go to Nebraska. Speaking of Nebraska, I go to Nebraska.
Just traveling.
Well, my parents left Kansas City and went to Nebraska. You got another church there. My father did. So I just decided I didn't know exactly where to start. So I thought maybe let's go to Nebraska and kind of go from there and figure out what I was going to do.
Whereabouts?
Lincoln, Nebraska.
So the home of Charles Starkweather.
Yes. I'm familiar with him as well.
Yeah. So if you don't know who he is, look him up. It's an interesting, and the reason I know that is I have a good friend, Charlie Cifarelli, who he's a New York guy, lived in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Right.
And, Starkweather. Starkweather.
Yep.
Starkweather, yeah. He killed seven or eight
cops,
people.
everybody.
Yeah, he killed everybody.
Yeah.
Bad dude.
Yeah. And so I went there, and so I put in to go to college up in Minnesota, actually. But I was in Nebraska.
Why not?
I know, well, all over. And before I started, I met this girl in Nebraska, ended up being my first wife, had 2 great kids with her or whatever. And then I went up to Minnesota before I got married. So, but we were dating at that stage, but went up to Minnesota and started college up there.
So you have kids, you're on this path, and how long, you said your first wife, so I'm assuming she's not your current wife.
Right.
How long did the marriage last?
It lasted almost 9 years. So almost 9 years.
Quick question for you. So when did you become a police officer?
Back up to Nebraska. So I went up to start my first year in college. Then I got married to my first wife. She got pregnant. She's from Nebraska. So I decided to quit college and come back down to Nebraska. Then I got on with the county there. So I was with the county so it's Lancaster County for about 11 years. So law enforcement started then.
So my question, the direction of that question is because one of the things that I've noticed, and I sort of keep a mental note of all this stuff, the people who are officers and then get married usually have a better chance of staying married than those who get married then become a police officer, because the job changes you.
It does, and it did. I saw a lot of things. I was involved with a lot of things as far as I was part of the crisis intervention team. So if officers are going through stuff, I ended up helping with that. I worked the courts, did all kinds of different things with that. I actually just, the reason why it only lasted about 11 years, I got burned out. I just was burned out. And there's a lot of guys leaving, going with BNSF Railroad, working for the railroad and making a lot more money. And so I followed suit with that.
So you went to the railroad after the county in
Yes.
Nebraska.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what brought me down to Texas. So I got
there's
divorced.
rail lines going down there. Sure.
So I got divorced, met another girl, got married to her, and both of our jobs brought us down to Texas. So that's how I got down to Texas in 2012.
In 2012. So you've been, everybody's migrating to Texas now, but
Yes.
Back then, nobody was really going yet.
Right. No.
So you're in wide open spaces.
Sure.
And what I know about Texas, man, Texas is it's humongous.
It is. You could take all day to get from one end to the other. Yeah, easy.
Which is foreign to people from the Northeast, because every except Pennsylvania, well, that's not true too, because Tom and I drove straight through Pennsylvania. In New Jersey, north-south, about 2.5 hours.
Right.
East-west, about an hour.
Right. No, you can, I think at one point from the southern tip to the northern tip, I'd say at least 10, 12 hours, at least. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
And probably most of the time is nothingness.
Nothing. Yes, that's true. Except if you get through Houston and then Dallas, Fort Worth, the traffic's horrendous.
Because I spent some time in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Montana, the Dakotas, and you're driving, and damn, man, I'm surprised accident. You could fall asleep while driving, but you're really not going to get into any trouble because everything's flat.
Right.
You know?
No trees,
There's
nothing.
You're not going to hit nothing.
Farmland,
you might hit a
that's
house.
it. Yeah.
So you settle in Texas with your
My
second wife.
Second wife. Yes.
All right. Whereabouts?
Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Okay.
Yeah. So we stay right up there. And I just stayed with the railroad for about a year after I get down there, and they were laying off a bunch just because of the economy or whatever. And so I was trying to find a different job because the railroad just wasn't going to do it.
And it's right to work. I mean, it's not union state. There's no contract involved, right? They could fire you.
Yeah. They want you on standby just in case, and then you can get back on. And I was just like, I'm not going to do that. I've got, family support and all that kind of stuff. So I got a job for a year working for the oil rig. So I drilled oil for a year in West.
You're out of law enforcement.
Yeah. So when I came down, obviously I was out of law enforcement, did the railroad, and then I decided, and I'd put my application in a couple departments. I just hadn't heard anything yet. So in the meantime of waiting, I got on with the oil rig and drilled oil for about 10 months.
You were a roughneck.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
Worst job I ever had.
I always like Bill Burr's take on stuff when he was digging on women, and he said, being a parent, being a mom is the hardest job. He goes, I thought being a redhead doing roofing in the summer was the most dangerous job. But he says any job that you can do in your pajamas is not the world's hardest job.
Right.
Until you've done things like this, or go out on a crab boat by the Aleutian Islands, see how that is.
120-degree weather. You're working 12-hour shifts. I would drink a whole case of water, wouldn't even have to use the restroom at all in the 12 hours. It's just, and I got down to about 150 pounds.
And it's dirty.
It's dirty. You're working with some rough, mostly felons, working with them. So they would leave for like a couple months and then come back because they messed up their probation or something like that. And then they come back. And
was it good money?
Good money. Yeah, good money. But you would work like 7 days on, and then you come home for 7 days. And I'd drive like 5 hours one way just to go to work on an oil rig.
Oh, so they had barracks there, I'm assuming?
And they would stay there for a month or so. Once the oil was dried up, then they go to another spot or whatever. But all over Texas, yeah.
So you finally get on Dallas? The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com.
So I got on with police department. It's the Transit Police Department in Dallas. It's called DART. So it's the Dallas Area Rapid Transit Police Department, which is located right in downtown Dallas. And so we work alongside with the City of Dallas Police as well. So we work all the transit. We have
you have the airports, you have the trains,
we have trains, buses, all the above. Yes.
So you're like the Port Authority in New Jersey.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So you had to see. I mean, you had to see some stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I worked a lot of South Dallas, which is pretty rough. And so down there, I mean, you're dealing with kids shooting at you. You've got all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, you're from a Midwest department, and you're going into the city.
Right.
All right.
Totally different.
It's a completely different type of police work.
Yes.
One is more service oriented, and the other one is you're just trying to stay alive and come home.
Right. And that is true. I mean, that's pretty much day one in Dallas. It's a tough environment there. Yes.
Yeah, I always say that, I used to sit and watch, and we did some stuff in the inner cities around here, but, I worked in a small suburban town. Right. And it's just completely different type of stuff where, yes, you had your stuff, you had your stolen cars, you had your break-ins, you had your chases, you had your assaults, all that stuff, domestics. But the repetition that you see in cities like that is going to give you training. What you learn in a year,
yes,
it's going to take you 10 years in Nebraska.
Right. Well, and they've always said, I don't know what the exact statistic is, but an average police officer only pulls their weapon maybe 3 or 4 times in their whole career. Yeah. I'd be lucky maybe once a week, maybe. Yeah. It just depends on the situation.
And some of the smaller crimes sort of get put by the wayside.
Sure.
It's kind of like the military. There's certain soldiers who are great wartime soldiers, and there's certain soldiers who are horrible peacetime soldiers.
Right.
Because peacetime, when you're quiet, and that's the problem with a small department. When they're quiet, they can nitpick on the smaller stuff. When you're in a busy environment, it's okay. His pants aren't pleated. We're okay.
Right.
We're all right. Just keep going.
Right. No, that is true. I mean, and you can get complacent. Any officer can do that if things are kind of slow or whatever. You're looking for stuff or whatever. But yeah, you just have to be on your toes, especially a big city.
Big cities too. Like big departments are good for this reason. As long as you're not first, you're not last.
Exactly.
You can hide.
Yes.
But there's always a bigger screw up.
Sure. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. You just go out there, do what's required, and then just go home, and that's all that you have to do. So
we brought you in here, and one of the most compelling stories of the last 10 years, and that is probably one of the biggest tragedies in law enforcement. And we're talking about the infamous Dallas 5 shooting.
Yes.
Okay, so you bore witness to that.
Yes.
Why don't you walk us through that day?
A little backstory before. So I got on the police department at DART in 2014. So I was there. So I had been with the department for a couple of years. The shooting took place in 2016, which was July 7th. It was towards the end of our shift. We were working like a mid shift, be done about 10 o'clock p.m. And about 9 o'clock, a lot of us will group together, kind of go in together, to get back to the department, work on reports, whatever we need to for the day. And then at 8:58, I remember the time exactly, a call came out over the radio that shots had been fired and officers are needed at El Central College, which is a college right downtown Dallas. And it's the same location where JFK got shot. It's all in that same
Dealey Plaza.
Yep, all right there. So it's all in that same area. And
That place is cursed.
Well, and it's bad area anyway. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of things happening in that area. We've got a lot of transit, but a big train hub, bus hub.
It's a big tourist area too.
It is. Well, there's a lot of different things down there for that. So at 8:58, we heard the call that shots been fired. Officers needed down here, and then they just started going on the radio. Another officer down. Just like we're like, what? Because you've heard, shots fired or whatever in the past, but it just seemed real different with this call. And they said we need officers here as quick as possible. And so I wasn't too far off. I came down about a block from where it was happening. Also at this time, a little backstory. There had been a couple black males that had been shot by police officers the last couple of days before.
So there were some tensions.
Yes. So there was a guy in Louisiana and one up in Minneapolis that got shot by police. So we had 1,000 people, 800, 1,000 people down there doing a protest at that time. And so it was heightened already. And it's open carry down in Texas. So you can have people with rifles, whatever, anybody can, open carry, conceal carry, everything down there. And so we were used to that, but just the intensity of these protests going on was intense.
So it's funny, the details. There is nobody I've ever met who's been in law enforcement that has a critical incident under their belt that doesn't remember the time, the place, what it smelled like, what they saw, what they heard. And you may get some details wrong. Okay,
right.
You may get some details wrong,
right.
but most of those details are just branded into your head.
Yes.
And that brand is going to last for a long time.
It still does. Yeah. It'll be 9 years coming up this July on this shooting.
So what was going on? Why did these people open fire? Did we ever find out?
Well, it ended up being just one individual. I won't say his name. I don't think he's worthy to say his name at all. People can look it up or whatever. He was a prior military guy, got kicked out of the Army for a couple different charges. Was kind of a mental case on some things. And he got caught up with some of the Black Lives Matter and a couple other different things. And he just went to the extreme on these things and just felt like that he had to do something by, and he actually said this, he wanted to kill as many white officers as possible that night.
It's amazing how every single group, no matter what spectrum it sits on, will have a contingency within that group that becomes radicalized. And they get fired up. And that's why I say a person is very rational thinking. A person is very, they have some intelligence, but when you put people together and they just start hammering you with information,
right,
you start seeing how, okay, that's how you get radicalized. That's how you start thinking about that. And it happens way too much.
Sure.
But you can't ban having groups. Groups are part of our culture.
Right. Well, and I think bottom line with him, because people have come up to me and said, why do you think he did that or whatever? I think bottom line, he harbored hatred in his life and he acted on that hatred. And I think but that could happen to any of us for any. I could have hatred towards an ex-wife or something and harbor that, and then I can act on that in a way that's not normal for a person to act on. So I think it was me personally, I think it was a heart issue that he just harbored hatred for, whether it's white officers or whatever the case may be, because of the information that was provided to him.
I'm embarrassed to say this, but I don't even know whether they got him alive.
I can tell you later on or now or whatever, how they actually blew him up with a robot.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
He had explosives on the robot and he barricaded himself inside the college, and SWAT was in there trying to talk to him, and he didn't want to hear it.
You gotta love Texas.
So that was the first time a department ever used a robot with explosives to kill somebody.
See, if that type of situation happened in New Jersey,
right?
Holy shit, this whole state would burn.
Sure.
You can't do that in this part of and that's why
it's still Wild West a little bit down there in Texas. Yes.
Yeah, they just got different rules and different mentalities down there. And some of it's good, some of it I'm not crazy about, but they are who they are.
Right.
And hey, listen, the guy did some damage, so
right.
And it looks like he wasn't going to give up.
No, a lot of officers. I mean, we put rounds into him. He had tourniquets on his body. He was ready. He had bulletproof vest, multiple weapons, multiple rounds, tourniquets, arms, legs, everything. So he was ready, and actually, what actually happened with him? They didn't know where he was, and they found because. I had a good buddy of mine, coworker, that ended up dying. He was one of the officers that passed away. His name was Brent Thompson. And because of what Brent did, Brent put some rounds into him, and the shooter was bleeding. And so the shooter ran up into the college, and they traced him because of the drops of blood from what Brent did to him. So, I lost a good brother, but because of his actions, they were able to find the shooter.
So let's walk through that day. So how did the call come in?
Okay, it just came over the radio that shots were fired at El Central College, or Lamar and Main Street was the cross streets there.
In that particular area, that's not. It's always a concern when shots are fired, but
yes.
It's not an uncommon event.
No, you would hear that. Not necessarily every day, but you would hear that at occasion, and you're like, okay, we'll get down there and we'll just handle the situation. And usually by the time enough officers got down there, the situation was already taken care of. So they kept repeating, though, that, hey, another officer's down. And then people were just overriding everybody on the radio back and forth, and it was just pure chaos at that point.
So this guy's he's ambushing them.
Yes.
Did he shoot around in the air to try to draw police?
No, there was 4, 5, 6 officers standing at the intersection, blocking a road so protesters can walk back and forth. He came up, he pulled his vehicle up to El Central, got out, and just started unloading on those 5 or 6 officers that were standing just gunning them down, and they all dropped to the ground right at that point. And while that was going on, I got there about a block south of that location. I was running up Lamar Street. Hundreds of people are running towards me. So I'm running in the middle of hundreds of people. My handgun's out. I'm looking at everybody's hands because I don't know who's shooting. The initial call was there's possibly 3 shooters. That's the initial call. So we're looking, I'm looking at everybody. They're running, screaming. I feel like I'm getting sucked in, and I feel like I can't get over past the people that are running towards me. I hear the gunshots. They're ricocheting off the skyscrapers. He's ricocheting bullets off the ground so he can hit multiple people. So it was just pure chaos, people screaming, running all over the place.
Did he leave a note or something?
I think there were some items he lived with his parents, I believe. And so there might've been some stuff. I'm not exactly sure if he did.
Like, I'm going to go do this and not come home.
No, from my understanding is he planned on doing it, but he didn't know when he was going to do it. And he thought that night was a perfect night because of the situation with protesting, a lot of people down there. He just thought that was a good night to do that.
Somebody becomes focused on creating that terror and that damage. It's hard to take them off of it.
Right.
What a shame. So how many officers were shot?
I think there was like 16 officers total and like 2 civilians. 5 died out of the 15 or 16 officers that were shot. A lot of my friends, one of my good friends is one that was killed. And then I had 3 other friends that were injured, but they lived through that.
So do you remember their names?
I remember Brent. It was a big department. I remember there's Misty McBride. She was one of female officer that got shot, I believe, in the arm and then through the chest. And she, single mom, great woman. So it was Misty McBride. And I can't recall the other 2 off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I've been at the department. Yes. So, but I was good friends with Misty as well. So that's why that one came about. And then Brent Thompson, he's the one that got ambushed and killed.
So you as an officer, your friends are dying, and the smoke clears, the guy gets blown up, the incident's over. And now you sort of have to move on.
Right.
You have to do your job. You have to deal with all this chaos.
Right.
I've been around when officers get shot. I haven't been on scene where another officer's been killed, thankfully. But I know officers who have been killed. and now you just have to sit there and go, why? Like, what is going on here? You it's hard to even comprehend.
Right. Right.
How did you move on from that?
It was very difficult at first. Obviously, that shooting started at 8:58. It didn't end until 2:30 that morning.
Wow.
That's when they ended up killing him at 2:30 in the morning. And then they just told us to go back to the department. We had a quick debriefing. I don't remember, honestly, I don't remember how long it was, maybe 30 minutes at the most. We all went home, and the next day they wanted us right back in. And so I didn't really have any, obviously I didn't sleep at all. My wife didn't say anything at the time. And so I just got back up, got my uniform back on, and went right back in for my next shift. And
no time to decompress, no time to hug your wife, no time to just process what the hell went on.
And then they send me to ground zero, and I work the entrance where FBI and everybody, that all the specialized groups coming in to evaluate what's going on, do their investigation. So I'm working at ground zero at the entrance with about 3 other officers. And so,
is anybody coming up to you and thanking you for stopping this before more people were killed?
Well, actually, I had a group of about 40 people come up to me, just to me. So the 4 officers that worked that area, I was the only white officer. Then next to me was an Asian officer that worked for my department. And then we had 2 black officers that worked for Dallas, and they were standing over by their car, but it was just the 4 of us working this entrance. So I had about 40 people come up to me, and they just start yelling in my face for about 45 minutes.
Yelling what?
They said they wish that my family was dead. They wish that I was the next officer that died. They wish that the 5 officers that died were still laying on the ground so that they could spit on their faces. They wish that they could kill anybody that's connected to me.
How much hate do you have in your heart to wishing somebody was dead? And see, I believe in karma. I do. I believe what goes around comes around. And if you're wishing harm on somebody else, harm is eventually going to come to you.
Right.
Because you're bearing all that hate in your heart.
Sure.
And that is sitting on your back, and it's weighing you down, and it's really keeping you from your full potential. One day, you hope, one day those same people that were yelling at you are going to come to realize that, say, oh man, what was I doing? What was I doing?
Right. Obviously, the guy that was standing next to me, he called one of our sergeants and said, hey, Burpee's going through this. There's multiple cameras from different TV news outlets across the street. All the cameras were on us. And they were like, hey, this is happening to Burpee. What do you want us to do? And my sergeant just said, let him take it. As long as there's not any blows or anything like that, you just let him take it. So
Boy, they fed you to the wolves,
yeah,
my friend.
so about 30, 45 minutes, I feel like it was probably about that long. After that, they walked away. And then I had a mother and a child walk up to me right after. And this little boy came up to me and handed me a card. And inside the card, it said, thank you for what you do. You're my hero. Love, Charlie. And I still, to this day, still have that card that he wrote me. I don't know how. I think he was about 4 or 5 years old. And the mother was there, and then they walked off and handed me the card after that happened. So I was during that time, obviously the yelling and all that, I'm questioning everything. I felt like I've given my life to this community. I felt like my department let me down. All these questions, why am I even doing this? I just feel like, I just lost a buddy less than 24 hours ago. Just all these things. And all of a sudden this kid comes out of nowhere and tells me that he's proud of me. And when he gave me that card, I was like, you know what? It's worth it for that one kid.
There are often times in your life when your mission gets sidetracked and you go on a tangent.
Right.
And then things like that card will realign your mission over in an instant.
Right.
Because you're going off in a direction, all these people are yelling at you like, well, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And you're sort of just going off here, and all of a sudden the card comes, it brings you right back. It's amazing how that one little act of just random kindness just can solidify your position.
It is. It really brought me back to center, to realize what I was doing was worth it. That was the whole mission of me being a police officer, was if I can just make a difference in somebody's life or bring hope or bring peace to somebody's life, then I feel like that I've done my part. It's not how many tickets you write or how many people you take to jail or all these other things. It's how much of a difference can you make? And I know initially when you go to the academy, oh, I'm going to go save the world, and that's not real life. And but when you see so much trauma and death and all this hopelessness in all these communities that we're working in, but then you see a little glimpse of hope in there, then it's worth doing what you do.
So whenever I went into an impoverished community, if I was doing a job or whatever it was, I try to tell people that, believe it or not, while you think that your position and your station in life is a disadvantage, it's actually an advantage. And I'll tell you why. If you had a life of luxury, if you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you had everything that you wanted, the bar to achieve success is not there.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Right.
But if you're born in an impoverished area and you don't have anything, and then all of a sudden you know that everything you have to work your ass off to, and then you appreciate it.
Right.
So the people who are born, especially economically, at a disadvantage, they actually have an advantage, in my opinion. Although they're not going to see it while they're in the middle.
Right.
Of it.
Right.
It's not going to be until they rise above it. They're going to be like, yeah, that stuff all had purpose.
Right.
And that's the important part. So you start to get a little distance from the shooting.
Yes.
How did you handle it mentally?
At the beginning, they provided a little bit of therapy. We all had to go together like as a group and kind of go with that at first.
And by the way, group therapy is not like what you see in the movie The Other Guys. When you pulled a shotgun and, what did you feel like when you shot the guy? It felt like my dick was made out of concrete. No, it's not like that.
Right. No, it was pretty much, I didn't like the way that it was set up. They had sergeants, lieutenants, captains all in there that weren't even really part of what was going on. And we had about 20 of us in a circle, and we just went around and said where we were when everything was going on and what did we do and how it made us feel. That was it. It was probably an hour long. That was it. And then they said, if you want to do any more therapy, we've got this program. You go do your 3-4 things, and then that's it or whatever. And they had like some chaplains that would be in briefing or whatever, doing different things. But most of us we're not going to go do that. And that was kind of the culture too. We didn't want to. Obviously, the culture at that time, we didn't want to feel weak or seem weak in front of all our other peers. And so majority of us never even.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I felt that way. It seemed like I would have a few nightmares here and there or whatever. But for the most part, I just, to be honest, I worked as much as I could after that. My second marriage was not going well at that time. And after the shooting, it got worse. I'm going to work as much overtime as possible. And I'd work 7 days a week, 12 hours every single day, just to stay busy. Because at home was even worse than working, so I was like, I'll just stay at work.
Now, not without going into what was going on in your second marriage.
Right.
It's hard for the people at home to understand what you're going through mentally.
Right.
Because here's the bottom line. You don't understand what you're going through mentally. How is somebody who is not in that job supposed to understand what you're going through?
Well, I didn't even know what post-traumatic stress or anxiety or I didn't even know those terminologies really because I felt like I never dealt. Sure, I dealt with stuff in the military with the bombing and those type of things, and then but I never. I'm like, oh, that's somebody else.
I'm not one of those guys.
Yeah, I'm not one of those. So I never really. I didn't know what was going on. And actually, so that was in 2016, the shooting. By 2019, I just couldn't function real well. I got divorced in 2018. So by 2019, I was like, I think I need a new scene. So I decided to leave Dallas and I got on with a small department, Corinth Police Department, just a suburb of Dallas. And I was like, if I go to a small department, then I'm not going to have to deal with all this stuff and I will just lay low and finish out my career. By then, total about 20 years at that point. So I went to that small department and I lasted maybe 4 months. And
it's a hard transition.
Yes. Well, mentally, that's when I started. I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. the anxiety, depression. I finally found out kind of what I was doing, but not really. I wasn't on any medication or any of that. It was just the beginning stages. But when I was with that department, physically, I was getting sick. Every time I got in a patrol car, I would vomit. I'd pull over the side of the road and vomit after every call. Eventually, I couldn't even drive. Like, I had to have people drive me to work so I can do my duties. And it got to the point where I had to walk away. And it was the worst day of my life when I turned in my badge and stuff and said, I can't do this anymore. It was so overwhelming. Up until that point, I really hadn't really dealt with this situation at all.
Yeah, at this point, you got 20 years of your life spent in one direction, thinking that this is your life, this is your purpose, this is where you're supposed to be. And now all of a sudden, that's over.
Well, I felt like my purpose, my identity, everything was gone.
Yeah.
I was a police officer. That was my identity and my purpose. And not until years later, I found out your purpose is way more, your identity is way more than just your job title. And so I went through a lot of therapy, a lot of, I had to get my inner circle correct, the people in there that were going to help me. Those that weren't going to help me, they were gone. I went through it was cut and dry. If you're not for me, I don't want you around me. And so obviously I went through that second divorce and going through all that. Once I left the police department, that little small department, I got married a third time. And so I haven't
you forget
learned
what it was like to get kicked in the nuts?
So so I ended up getting married again for the third time. But I still was just in the beginning stages of dealing with the shooting and all the other things that happened in my 20-year career. Everything was getting piled up, and it just, eventually the dam just broke, and I couldn't function at all. I couldn't find a job. I couldn't function. And at this time, I still get married regardless, right through that situation.
You're like Paul McCartney. You just get married.
Right,
like
right. I don't like being alone, so I just was like, hey, I need a companion, I think, and no dish on the third wife or whatever. But I had to find myself again. I had to find myself through that. And so I went through a series. It took me about 7 or 8 therapists just to get through one that I had one therapist tell me to blow bubbles in my driveway.
Who was Bubbles? Is it a guy down the street?
Yeah, with the thick glasses. Yeah. And so I...
that usually works. I'm sorry, man. That was a layup. You gave me a layup. I had to say it.
Sure. And they wanted me to blow bubbles, and that was going to solve all my problems or whatever. And I was like, no, I think you need to blow bubbles, and told them,
Yeah, go pound
leave.
salt.
Yeah.
Have you been back to the area yet?
One time downtown, I went down there. I just felt like I needed to talk to some of my buddies that were down there again. And so I actually went down to the exact location. And there's still nicks in the pillar where Brent died. So it was very overwhelming going down there. Very overwhelming.
It took me 10 years to go back to the scene of my shooting.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently.
Right.
Like so what is it? This year will be 12 years since the shooting. It took me 10 years to go back.
Yeah.
And I was in the car with my son, and I was like, we were just going for a ride. And somehow I ended up there. And my son's sitting in the car with me, and I'll never forget. And I said, right there. Because it was a townhouse, right? So you can see the back deck.
Right.
I said, right there is where it happened. And he goes, wow, Dad, that's small. And I said, yeah, it was up close and personal.
Right.
Different type of, shootings are all the same as far as the effects.
Right.
But different types of shootings. Like
Sure.
you have mass chaos. You have mass chaos. You don't, like, I knew what was going on. You kind of,
I didn't.
Just trying
There's
to
so
figure it
many
out.
people. Well, there's just so many people there. You just were so overwhelmed. And yeah.
So if this person really wanted to do damage against white officers, like they said, and he's shooting rounds at the ground, yet there's a Black Lives Matter, which I'm going to assume most of the crowd was black.
Right.
That's how skewed their thinking is.
Right.
It's like, well, they're collateral damage. I'm really trying to get these guys, but if they get hit, so what?
Right.
Who cares?
Well, and a couple of the officers were Hispanic. They weren't even white. So one of them that died, he was Hispanic as well. So So yeah, there was, just their way of thinking in that situation.
I want people to realize that you go to work every day if you're not law enforcement or not EMS or not fire or not a vet. You go to work every day, it's kind of a given that you go home. The world of law enforcement in general, especially in the place that you look, where you kind of expected to go home, but you knew at any moment anything could pop off,
Right.
such as this. And I'm sure those 5 officers who lost their lives that day, they went to work, kissed their wife, kissed their children, went to work, expecting to come home, and they didn't.
Right.
And they didn't. And, the culture, just to speak to the culture, we were talking a little bit before. It's, I'm certainly not a Cowboys fan, but Dallas Cowboys actually, they were going to wear a memorial patch on their jerseys. In the NFL, because, that fucking, I love football, but the NFL, Roger Goodell is not my favorite person. He was going to find these guys. Meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick is wearing pig sneakers for cops and all sorts of shit and riling people up. But the NFL was going to fine him. I forget what it was. It was a big amount of money. And Jerry Jones, and he get a lot of respect from me. Jerry Jones goes, "I'll pay the fine."
Right.
And he had him do it.
Right. Because he did what was right.
That was what was right.
Yeah.
That was where they were hometown boys.
Right.
And they lost their lives doing their job, doing what they believed was right, making sure. And a lot of these officers were trying to shield people from getting shot.
Right.
Gosh, man, it's what a absolute tragedy, and what a stupid way to unleash your anger.
Right.
You just want to hurt as many people. You just want people to hurt because guess what? Here's the bottom line. That guy was hurting.
Right.
He was hurting really well.
Right.
He had no purpose. He had no faith. He had no soul. He had lost his soul, whatever was going on with him.
Right.
And I'm just going to inflict as much pain as I possibly can. Because how many officers are in the same situation you are, having trouble functioning, having trouble doing this, having trouble doing that? They can't go here. They can't go. They'll never sit with their back to the door. They don't like crowds. All those stuff.
Right.
All that stuff.
I deal with that still. A lot of that. I do want to share one little thing with Brent that I think is important that people hear this. And we talked about the faith aspect. 2 weeks before the shooting, Brent and I were walking up to the parking lot after shift, and we were going to our trucks to head home.
Of course, you live in Texas, you got to have a truck.
Everybody had trucks.
Yeah.
So we were walking to the parking lot, and he was just about to get married, and he's like, "Hey, I want to get my life right. I'm getting ready to start this new relationship, all this other stuff." And he knew I was a man of faith in the community there with the police department and those type of things. And he came up to me and goes, "Hey, Chad, I just want to make sure that my life is right. Can you say a prayer for me," or something like that? And so I said a prayer, and he's like, "God, I just want you in my life," all that kind of stuff. So I just want, even other officers that were in my department, they may not know this, but I know I'm going to see Brent again. Just based off of his decision making that night, 2 weeks to the day before the shooting.
Brent was getting prepared.
Yes.
The cards were already written.
Yeah.
They were already dealt.
Right.
He was that was his destiny.
Right.
And he was being prepared for something better.
Right.
So, Chad, listen. I know you're still struggling, and I know there's parts of your life that you still are getting over this stuff. Like this is something that's never going to leave you.
Right.
You were witness to history.
Right.
Before we come to the end of this thing, because our time is almost up, I want you to give out any plugs you want. You want to give out your social media, anything you're working with, and then I want to get in. Before we leave, I want to get into one cool story.
Okay.
So why don't you give out your where to find you?
Yeah. On social media, you can find me on Instagram. It's just Chad _ the letter B as in boy 514. That's where most of the time you can reach me right there on Instagram. And for that, yes.
So this is how cool life is and how weird life is. We got connected because you found me through this show, and there was another gentleman named Josh Burnett, who probably doesn't want, I'm going to say his name, who connected me in a much similar way. And I can't remember what brought Josh to me, but he reached out on social media and I answered him back. And one day I'm sitting there on my phone. You have my personal number. Josh has my personal number. I've spoken to you both. One day I'm sitting there and I get a picture of you and Josh. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yes. Yeah.
Just take a couple minutes and I want you to explain this one because it's such a cool story.
Sure. Part of my, healing process with all this, I got connected with a foundation called Mighty Oaks Foundation, and they're based out of Texas. And they were having a gala that night for people that have already gone through the program. We went to a retreat, dealt with a lot of healing and that type of thing. So we get to the gala and we're all assigned tables. So I sit down at a table. I'm there by myself. I didn't bring anybody or anything like that. Then all of a sudden, this guy and his wife sit down next to me, and we just start talking or whatever. And your name popped up somehow. He said something first, and I'm like, yeah, hey, I follow Kevin as well. And I said, hey, let's get a picture together and we'll send it. So we got a picture together, and we just talked about how much you've impacted our life and gave us hope in the situations that we went through. And so we took that picture, sent it to you. You responded right back. And
it was crazy.
It was. Yeah.
And I think the thing that binds all three of us, so Josh, yourself, and myself,
right.
Here's what binds us all. We know that we're not perfect. We know striving for perfection is an unreachable goal.
Right.
I fall all the time. Okay. There are going to be times when you falter. And if we know that we have those vulnerabilities in each of us, then we don't have to hide it from each other.
Right.
Because, okay, yeah, I know Chad's going to fall every once in a while, and I know Josh is going to fall, and I'm going to fall once in a while. And then you start to lean on each other. And that's the people who I keep around me.
Yes.
The people who aren't are unapologetically imperfect.
Right.
All right. And I think that's where everybody sits.
I agree. And that's now what I'm doing now from here on out. The last year, I've been pursuing peace. So whatever that looks like to people, whether it's my inner circle, my resources, all that type of thing. If it's not bringing me peace, then I cut it away. And I've always heard that when you decrease your life, you actually profit more from decreasing. So take all the non-essential things out of your life and you focus on the things that are going to bring you peace. And bottom line, back to the faith thing in Philippians, it says that God gives you a peace that passes all understanding. We can't comprehend why did I go through all that stuff. Doesn't matter. That he can bring you peace and we don't understand it, but it still can be a part of our life. And so I just want to encourage people, pursue peace through faith, and there's hope on the other side.
Well, God has a way of decluttering your life for you.
Yes, I agree.
So Chad, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and we always end every show the same way. You bore witness to this awful event. You had this full life, your career, your path, and it all disappeared in a blink of an eye. And you've gone through a lot of different suffering because of what you witnessed.
Right.
But it had to teach you something. There's lessons in suffering. I want to know what your suffering has taught you.
My suffering taught me that you can't do life by yourself, that there are resources, and obviously your faith can be the source for you, but there's also resources that are available. There are people out there that want to help you, but you have to be willing to die to yourself and to walk towards those resources that are available to you. And you can heal. It's not going to be overnight, but you can heal. You just take one day at a time, one step at a time, and the hope is right around the corner.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling this is just beginning for you and I.
Yes.
Because I think we got some stuff to do.
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of the Dallas Five with Chad Burpee. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Faith gives hope and faith gives purpose. Maybe don't get married 3 times. It might be a good idea.
Right.
Police work definitely changes you. Details of trauma are crystal clear. Some sacrifices can never be forgotten, but most importantly, you can't do life alone. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com. Put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson, and of course, follow The Suffering Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.